Today we have Mr. Athar Shahab, a distinguished CEO with a proven track record in driving growth and innovation across diverse sectors. Athar worked with ICICI, IDFC, L&T, amongst others. He has a very strong background in shaping the infrastructure policies of India and also financing infrastructure. Known for his strategic acumen and the ability to foster high-performing teams, he has led successful initiatives in business development, M&A, and operational excellence. He studied from VSS, University of Technology, and here he is with us despite his busy schedule and board meetings. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Athar Shahab. And with this, welcome, sir. Welcome on board the Leadership Interview Series.
Thank you, Prashant, for having me on this series.
Oh, it's wonderful that you could spare time, and I'm sure the nuggets of your wisdom and your career trajectory will be very helpful for youngsters who are building their careers. And to start with, I want to know which school you went to and how did the whole academic process shaped you as a professional and as a leader?
Prashant, my academic journey began on a very humble note. My father was in the government, and my first school, the memory of my first school is that of a village school, and it had a thatched roof and an earthen floor. And we had a Pandiji who used to teach us in that school. So very humble background with a very modest bunch of people. But eventually I landed up in St. Xavier's in Patna, where I briefly studied, which was probably one of the best schools in the city and in the state. And from there to multiple schools as my father kept on getting transferred. And eventually I finished my +2 and I went to study at VSS UT that you mentioned. It was called the University College of Engineering, Burla. When Hirakud Dam was built, the government wanted to build an engineering college next to it. So they built one close to the dam in a place called Burla in Sambalpur in Odisha, which has now evolved into a full-fledged multifaceted university called the VSS University of Technology, Burla. And from there I started working. My career started with a company called MN Dastoor and Company, in short Dastoor Co. And I started working with them as a project engineer at their Tata Steel site, where I worked with them on the Phase 3 modernization of Tata Steel. And I saw in front of my eyes a completely new blast furnace, a hot rolling mill, a slab casting shop, a new LD shop, all coming along. And for me, that experience was very valuable because for the first time I saw an operating plant and of course a full-fledged project from end to end. And then I did my MBA from XLRI and I landed up at ICICI.
This is a very wonderful journey, and I'm sure this has had deep impressions in shaping you as a human being and as a professional. And ICICI those days was probably the best company to start the career with. So you got really the best start in terms of career. How did your journey in ICICI, IDFC, etc., help you shape up your leadership, and how did you impact the policies on infrastructure and in infrastructure financing?
Before I go there, Prashant, I just want to reflect, since we are having such an open-ended, nice discussion. on the education part. And probably you saw that I started in a village and ended up in Accelerate, and of course in between a stint at St. Xavier's Patna as well. So I saw the best, and of course I also went absolutely at the ground level. And I think during my schooling and university education, to have exposures to the two extremes was extremely useful in shaping me as a rounded individual. And with all that, I landed up in ICICI. ICICI was at the cutting edge of project financing at the time when I joined them in 1995. But I initially joined a division which was called the Advisory Services Division, led by Mr. Suneet Maheshwari. And he was deeply involved in advising both the Department of Telecom, Ministry of Power, and many state governments in opening up these sectors and bringing in private sector investments. By the way, these were the times when mobile phones were not visible. Nobody knew what mobile telephony was. Nobody knew that private companies could generate and sell power. But I was quite amazed at the level of activity that was going on in ICICI. And he called me one day and said, "You are a civil engineer, so why don't you look at the rest of infrastructure?" I said, "What does it mean?" He said, "Things like roads, ports, water supply." And he said, I expect a lot of private investment to come in these sectors. I couldn't believe it, honestly, that all these things which are usually considered as public goods very much within the domain of the government could actually be supplied by the private sector. And we had Lalita Gupte, who was our executive director, who was serving on the Rakesh Mohan Committee on Infrastructure. And I started reading all the material that was coming to the committee. I remember in the first 6 months at ICICI, I probably read 10 or 11 volumes of papers from around the globe about infrastructure. And I also remember reading a very interesting World Development Report of 1994. And I think these first 6 months, exposure to the global high quality material, and of course, interaction with Mr. Maheshwari, rest of the team, the top management of ICICI, gave me a glimpse of, the future of the country. So I worked with Mr. Maheshwari for a couple of years. And then I wanted to do project finance, which was a core business of ICICI. And that journey took me to Kolkata, where I worked in the project finance department of ICICI. And like any other young officer, you are handed a portfolio of companies, some of them doing exceedingly well, some of them not doing so well. And of course, some of them are in the courts for various kind of proceedings. Very interesting experience. I learned a lot. And I think this 3-year stint with ICICI kind of laid the right foundations for me to land a job at IDFC. In fact, I went out to IDFC and I said, "I want to work with you guys. I know about infrastructure. I think India is going to do very well in infrastructure." I'm sure they were quite amused, but eventually they agreed to take me on board. And in the mid of 1998, I shifted from Kolkata to Mumbai to join the founding team at IDFC. And it was pretty much like a startup, Prashant, because we all used to sit in a hall and we had a few desk phones, one common printer, and our MD Balaji Rao and a couple of other senior colleagues were sitting in the cabin. And those days, Chairman Deepak Parekh used to hold a weekly meeting telling us, how we should organize ourselves and what should we do. So it's all very interesting. ICICI was an old institution by that time. It was established in 1955. And having left all that and come back to IDFC and to start it from a scratch was a very interesting experience.
That's so nice. That's absolutely so nice. And it's wonderful to see a humble, highly educated professional taking to the best of the employers in that time and era. And then in that time and era, today it's very common for youngsters to leave big companies and join startups. But in that time and era, leaving a established company and joining a startup and then helping set up that startup and growing it big. What motivated you to join IDFC?
See, when Lalita Gupte was working on that committee, the committee had actually come up with this idea that India needs a specialized financial institution for infrastructure. In fact, Dr. Rakesh Mohan had also coined a name for this institution, and he called it IFDC, Infrastructure Finance and Development Corporation. Eventually, the report was accepted by the government, and Mr. Chidambaram, who was the finance minister at that time, he called upon Deepak Parekh to set it up. But he said two preconditions. He said, Deepak, this company has to be chaired by you. And second, the name has to rhyme with HDFC. So we came to be known as IDFC. And Deepak Parekh became the first chairman of the company. Then he appointed Nasser Manji, one of his executive directors at HDFC, to lead a task force to write the business plan of IDFC. And Nasser did not like the name corporation. He thought it was a bit outdated. So he made that a company, and that's how we came to be known as IDFC, Infrastructure Development Finance Company. And when I read that business plan, honestly, of course, I had the background of working on the committee and I knew the path that the country was on. But I must say the plan that Nasser and team had put together also played a very important role. I was very excited. I thought it was an opportunity of a lifetime to do something for the country. So I came down and I literally begged them to give me a job. And they took me on board in 98, for which I am still grateful to all those involved. And in 2 years' time, I was made the head of transport vertical, business head. We were organized in 3 verticals: power, telecom, and transport. And in the year 2000, if I recall correctly, at the age of 32 years, I became business head, with an entire portfolio of roads, ports, airports, railways, pipelines, logistics, all coming under my ambit. And I think from the year 2000 to 2005, I led my team, which had glorious achievements in 5 years. We were straddling policy. We were working with the policy makers at the central level, at the state level. We were drafting the frameworks. We were writing those bidding documents which will help them invite the private sector, hand-holding them through the bidding processes. And then, of course, when the projects came up for financing, we supported them with funding as well. And that was a time when this whole concept of private investment was very new, very novel. There were not many takers. Banks did not understand, and I remember not only going to banks and telling them about infrastructure financing, but actually those days I also used to do many sessions for bankers as a faculty and tell them about infrastructure financing, the global best practices. It's all very interesting, and I think by the time we took IDFC to a very successful IPO in 2005, I had a fantastic portfolio of about 50 projects spread across all the major sub-verticals in transport. And it was in terms of credit risk, it was one of the best portfolios in the country. And more importantly, I nurtured a team of young leaders, Prashant. I'm very proud of course, when you look back and you you recall projects that you were involved in, you feel very happy. But more importantly, you feel happy that you got the opportunity to contribute for your country, and you built a pipeline of young leaders. And to do that at a relatively young age myself, I was just about 32 when I took it over. And the thought of nurturing younger people came early to me, and I think you only get better at it, when you are at it. And I think I'm really privileged that I got it at an early stage in my career, Prashant.
So from here, three questions come to my mind. Question one is that I recall, because I kind of also started my career late 80s, early 90s. The transport infrastructure was probably the poorest in India amongst whatever countries one had seen, heard of, right? And I used to jokingly in our friend circle used to call, we used to, early 90s, we used to ride motorcycles quite a lot. And I've driven from Bombay to Daman and Bombay to uh, uh, Lonavala and various other places near Bombay, and all on bikes. And we used to enjoy going. One, we didn't have cars, and two, we didn't. We enjoyed going on bikes because on any highway you go, there was like 3 kilometers long jam and 5 kilometers long jam, and so we used to call these highways national. Instead of national highways, we used to call them national pagdandis. And we because we were on bikes, we could just find our way and get away. But yeah, that was the state of infrastructure. And from there, today we have, I wouldn't call it world class, but we have a very decent infrastructure. I think the foundation got laid of infrastructure between 2000 and 2005. And I'm sure there must be a lot of policy bottlenecks, etc., etc.
One interesting anecdote, Prashant. Prime Minister Vajpayee had set up a PM's task force on infrastructure. And he had put Jaswant Singh as the head of that task force. And it had 4 or 5 cabinet ministers. And Chairman Deepak Parekh was one of the members. So one fine day, Deepak came back from that meeting from Delhi, and he called us and said, how much of petrol and diesel is sold every year in this country? And we were wondering why is he asking this question. So he says, I have told the government that they should levy 1 rupee cess on petrol and diesel, and that should be used for building highways. So we were all trying to gather information quickly, and we came up with some numbers.
And there was no Google. No, Google had come by then, but the information on the internet was still quite scanty.
Available, right?
No, it's quite scanty.
And then we said, okay, every year we can create a corpus of this. And imagine if we set up an institution that can borrow against this regular inflow. There is so much more that we can do. And this famous 1 rupee cess on petrol and diesel, which played such a catalytic role, and the government ended up setting up a road fund, etc., came from Chairman Deepak Parekh. And subsequently, as part of that task force, we were the secretariat of that task force as IDFC. And we were doing all the legwork, back office work for the task force. And half the time I used to spend in Delhi working with NHAI and Ministry of Road Transport and Ministry of Shipping. And it was so exciting. Our Delhi guest house had become like a workshop. We were perpetually camping here. And the whole concept that NHDP will come up, you will have expressways running from north to south and east to west, and the golden quadrilateral. I think those were heady days, and I worked a lot with the successive NHAI chairman. And in a sense, when the government creates such an institution as IDFC, embeds them with other government organizations, then the value that eventually came out was phenomenal. Just in highways alone, we closed the the BOT toll kind of concession framework. Then I had the good fortune of co-authoring the annuity concession document. And again, the anecdote is that Chairman Deepak Parekh came back from Delhi and he said, what can we do around, paying highway contractors in installments? And we don't pay anything upfront to them, but we pay only after the construction is done and over a period of time so that the initial quality is not compromised. So we started looking at in international benchmarks, etc., etc. And it came very close to what UK had already done as part of their private finance initiative. So with whatever research was available, I then put together a note and we called it the annuity approach for doing highways. And this was sent to the advisor, the then advisor to the Prime Minister, N.K. Singh. And N.K. Singh said, it's a great idea, so why don't you bring it to the task force? And then that one pager or two pager had to be converted into a comprehensive contract between the government and the private sector. And then I, with my colleagues at IDFC, we co-authored a remarkable document for the first time in the history, which not only became a very valuable document for highways, but then it was utilized across many sectors. So wherever government wanted some infrastructure to be built, but paid for over a period of time, that became kind of a standard framework. Then we also did the comprehensive private sector framework for a port sector. And the IDFC guidelines for ports then became the Bible for all the port trusts. And we handheld them in many private sector projects at that time. I think in life, you rarely get an opportunity that you work in a private sector organization and with that kind of a culture, but you have a strong mandate and ownership of the government and the freedom to really work with the government and give them the right advice. And I'm really grateful to the bureaucrats of that time as well, who listened to us and incorporated a lot of our suggestions into designing and building the infrastructure of that time.
That's really fantastic. That's really fantastic. So you've created such a big impact on the infrastructure of this country, which is, I think the country will remain indebted to what you've contributed. My second question as a corollary to the first one was that the leaders that you built during those 5 years, I believe they would be all now CEOs of various infrastructure companies or infrastructure funds.
Yes, they are all CXOs or CEOs and doing very well. And I'm very proud we still meet and reminisce about the good old days. And I think for all of us, that was a golden period in our respective careers. I must say I was lucky to have such bright people working with me. And I will say I will take just a little bit of credit in shaping their careers too, because I was very conscious of the grave responsibility of working with people. And I remember my first meeting with my team when I took charge in the year 2000 as a leader, because my portfolio was very small. Big transactions were taking place in telecom and power, and nothing much happening in transport. So my team was, a little despondent and were not sure, things were not happening. And my first message to the team was that stop crying and whining, right? and take charge. And if the pipeline is choked or there's nothing to do, then let's open that pipeline. And that meant that we had to work very closely with the government, both at the central and the state level. It was a tough job because when you were in business school, you were not taught these things. There was no prior experience that you could go back. They were not even seniors that you could go and ask them. That's why I'm stuck in this situation. What should I do? So I think that was the icebreaker moment, right? as an icebreaker moves, it has no precedent. It has to cut through that ice itself and make the way for others to follow. And for me and my team, that was, a defining moment, actually. We had to really navigate. And once we cracked it open, then the floodgates really opened up. And then it became very exciting. And one of the interesting anecdotes, once again, is that a guy came from abroad, two incidents in IDFC. One is a guy came from Singapore, very senior businessman, and he was talking to us about a transaction. And he met my team, he met me, and then he came out of the office and said, this is the best project finance team that I've come across anywhere in the world, right? So I think that I wear that comment as a badge of honor even today. And then a couple of elderly gentlemen came from the US, and for whatever reason, the MD of IDFC asked me to meet them and tell them the kind of work that we were doing. So I presented to them whatever work we were doing in a very matter-of-fact way. And after the presentation got over, the guy got up from his chair, the elderly gentleman. He came, he shook my hands, he hugged me, and he said, Athar, I wish I was in your country, your age, doing what you're doing, right? Mm. So unforgettable moments, you can get many prizes, awards, etc. But these are the moments that you really cherish. Similarly, the opportunity to present the work of IDFC at the Prime Minister's office. So Nasser Manji, who was our managing director, he once said that, we have to make a presentation to the PMO. We've done so much work, we now need to go and tell them, and they're asking us to showcase whatever we have done. So I thought Nasser is going to make the presentation himself, given the forum and so on. But after the presentation was done, he said, Athar, you are going to make the presentation, right? So I land up in the Prime Minister's office, I look around, and there must be at least 50 very senior officials of the government. So he asked for a glass of water, and I kind of prepared myself. And then I spoke for about an hour or an hour and a half. After I left the PMO, Nasser called me and he said, Athar, I'm getting congratulatory messages from all over. And people are amazed and thrilled to hear the kind of work that we have been doing. So that was again a fantastic experience. And lastly, before I forget, I had the good opportunity of working with Dr. Rakesh Mohan on another committee on Indian Railways. And Indian Railways has always been in all kinds of problems. And the financial burden, the lack of capital, how to fund growth, they have been weighing heavily on the minds of ministers and bureaucrats. So a committee was set up. Dr. Rakesh Mohan was made chairman of the committee. And Nasser, who was the MD of IDFC, was asked to do all the financial work for the committee. So one day he called me and said, Athar, what are you doing? I said, of course, I have my day job. I'm doing a fair bit of work. He said, stop everything and, study Indian Railways. So I just couldn't understand the context. So next 3 days, I had to make a presentation, first to him and senior people at IDFC. After seeing that presentation, he said, you are going to make this presentation at Rail Bhavan tomorrow. So next day, I land at Rail Bhavan in Delhi. And again, there must be 50, 60 people, including the chairman railway board, many people from various other ministries, top people from the private sector, including head of management consultancy firms, where I spoke with my 3-day knowledge about railways. And Dr. Rakesh Mohan was chair of the committee. So after that presentation, he said, Athar, you and I need to work together on this entire financial modeling of Indian Railways. So for the next 6 months, I worked with Dr. Rakesh Mohan. Again, incredible experience. And then we draw some very useful inferences for Indian Railways, which he captured in his report and of course gave me credit as well. I think, to sum it up, IDFC was not only about building a nice pipeline of projects or funding them, etc. That you could have done anywhere. But the once in a lifetime opportunity of shaping a few things in the country, working with some of the best peoples in the government and outside, I think that was a huge takeaway from IDFC.
I can empathize because this particular committee that you're talking of on railways, led by Rakesh Mohan, Kishore Chokar, Managing Director, Tata Industries, was part of that committee. And occasionally, I used to represent him. And I was also a youngster. And, when I went there, I was in awe of all the people. And that's where I was smiling when you said that. I used to, find it a little difficult to make my points. And which, of course, the points were already discussed with KSE, and it was not that I was speaking out of my turn. But yeah, it was a little difficult, and you made the full presentation and led the discussion that is commendable. And so the third point after the policy and the people is the capital. Right. I do remember Tata Group was $18 billion and now it is maybe more than $118 billion. The economy was small. If I recall right, no, our target for GDP was in 2000 was $1 trillion and we missed that. And I think we were at $800 million. And with that kind of small economy and small money available, how did you manage capital for such huge infrastructure development?
See, the IDFC had a pole position in infrastructure, in the sense that our understanding of the project risks, the rewards, and not only that, we were actually involved in the risk allocation framework and drafting fair agreements which would make capital available. And one of the biggest pools that opened up for infrastructure was bank financing. Banks were not doing long-term financing of infrastructure. And when we wrote the business plan for IDFC, we always used to say that our job is to catalyze private investment into infrastructure. We were never supposed to be the biggest funder of infrastructure.
Of course, of course.
And we thought that we must get banks in, and we must get the longer pools of capital in as well. So insurance companies and pension funds and so on and so forth. So I think during that period that I spent between 98 to 2005, we laid the foundation for what happened later. Now we have, of course, a lot of foreign players who are very deeply interested, and a lot of long-term capital from abroad has come into Indian infrastructure. But it was very hard to lay the road to begin with. People just didn't understand what they're getting into. There were a lot of concerns. I'm glad that we are where we are, but it was really difficult at that time. The second thing I must say that the bigger challenge I would say was getting equity for infrastructure, because large players were not interested. Traditional business houses were not interested in infrastructure. People who were most interested were contractors, who thought infrastructure is just another way of keeping their construction business going. And therefore, they were not used to putting in a substantial sum of money as equity. So the challenge before us at that time was to balance the interest of these people vis-a-vis ensuring that they continue to have some skin in the game. And I think in that challenge as a country, we succeeded only partially, of course, and which also led to some difficulties later on. But I think that is still work in process. And I think you still have a situation where we need to cover some distance. Usually what happens globally is that you have developmental capital which will come in the initial part of the project, and then it'll make way for long-term capital. That has begun to happen in some sectors, but still there is some distance to cover. So you picked up the right question, Prashant. Capital was one of the biggest challenges. A lot of work done, but still work to do.
Now that's so nice that you could mobilize the money parked in the banks for something as noble as infrastructure, which is the backbone of the development of any country. And it's always a catch-22 between the GDP growth and the infrastructure growth, which will lead what. And somewhere that cycle has to be broken to reignite it. Having turned around the infrastructure sectors of the country, which was probably, I think, the best and the biggest thing to do, then you moved on and you worked with a few private sector companies, and you transformed several businesses, and some of them were seen as almost impossible to be transformed, but you did manage to transform them. So would you like to share some of these examples and how, I mean, what probably shaped your leadership character in IDFC and which might have helped you to transform these businesses and impact not only the business, but the people in the business, the people in the society around the business, and a lot of vendor organizations dependent on these businesses.
So before I answer that very important question, Prashant, let me just fill in the gap. From IDFC, I went to the Middle East to work with a bank there in Bahrain. And even though that stint was brief, it gave me very good international exposure. And it gave me exposure, more importantly, to a new sector, which is real estate. I came back to India in the year 2006. And briefly, I worked with an American company called AES. But IDFC pulled me back to set up another platform for investing growth capital into infrastructure called IDFC Projects. And this morphed into a joint venture in the year 2011 called UniQuest Infra Ventures, which I ran as the founder CEO for a couple of years. It was a road-focused venture. And after leading it for 2 years, I went to work with Anil Agrawal in Vedanta for a couple of years as CEO Infrastructure and Real Estate. And from there, in the year 2015, I landed up in L&T, initially as head of corporate strategy, and then as CEO of Nava Power in the January of 2016. And of course, all these experiences taught me a lot, the international experience, the experience at IDFC Projects and UniQuest, as well as Vedanta. There's a lot to talk about. But I think the brief stint as head of corporate strategy at L&T was extremely valuable. L&T is a remarkable company. And I think the view that you get from inside is amazingly different. You can't figure out what L&T is till the time you are actually inside it. And the sheer depth and breadth of the work that L&T does was mind-boggling, actually. And to me, it was a huge learning experience working with Chairman A.M. Nayak in his office. Then he gave me the responsibility to turn around Nava Power Limited. Nava Power was a power generation company out of Punjab, where close to 10,000 crore had been invested and it was losing money. So I was asked to go and see if I could turn it around. And then in that tenure, I closely worked with SNS and other leaders, and Mr. S.N. Roy, who was my immediate boss in L&T. And between 16 to 21 was once again an intense period of business turnaround. During this period, the company not only turned around operationally, but also financially and culturally. And one of my dreams was to make it India's best power generation company. And I'm very glad to share with you, Prashant, that it is now recognized as a role model in the industry. And even though it was a single asset company in a single location, we didn't have a large breadth like NTPC and others. But nonetheless, I had a dream and aspiration that we can be the best. So we became the best. We paid down our debts very substantially. We became profitable. And I think that stint also taught me some extremely valuable management lessons and leadership lessons too.
And what are these?
So I think, again, I'll tell you in the form of a story. And when I landed there, I found people had practically given up on the business. It's like walking into a battlefield and you find that your lieutenants have no intention to fight. They probably also knew that I had a background as a banker. So they thought that I've been sent from the corporate office to quickly pack it off and sell it at a throwaway price. So one of the things that I had to do is to call everybody that I'm not here to pack it off, and I'm here for good, and that we are going to transform ourselves. That initial messaging was extremely important. The second message, there was a lot of negativity in the organization. And if the organization is not doing well financially, then the negativity just seeps through the bloodstream of the organization. And everybody thinks that ab kuch nahi hoga. So I called all the staff. I had an open house and I said, you do what you are supposed to do. You're a boiler maintenance engineer, go and maintain the boilers to the best of your ability. You're the turbine guys, take care of the turbine. You're the purchase people, make sure that you achieve excellence in procurement and finance and so on and so forth. I said there's no hiding away from the existential problems that we are facing. And that's a role that I have to undertake with the senior most people in the organization. Stop worrying about what will happen to the company. It is my job. And I think immediately they felt relieved. And then, of course, there's a sense of relief, but you also need to see the results. Right? And as luck would have it, the company was fighting a major court case, which was very important for the company's viability. We had lost the matter at the local level, which is the state commission. And the matter was supposed to be heard at the tribunal in Delhi. Throwing caution to the winds, I told the lawyer that ask the bench if I can argue my own matter. So my colleagues got hold of me and they said, sir,
interesting.
This is not done. Please understand what you're subjecting yourself to. I mean, if you lose the case tomorrow, what's the world going to say? But I didn't bother, Prashant, at all. I said, come what may. The lawyers have done their job, but still as a CEO, I must stand up and tell the court what I think I must and I should say. Judge was also amused. He gave me the permission. So over 2 sessions, I made a detailed PowerPoint presentations arguing for the company. In the end, I still ended up with an adverse order. And the only takeaway was that in that judgment, my name is recorded as an arguing counsel for the company. Wrongfully so, because I was not a counsel. But nonetheless, this is the reward I got. And then we go in front of the Supreme Court. And if you know how the system works, if you've lost two matters already in succession, there is very little hope that you will get it all reversed in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But I was like a man possessed and very convinced of our case. We filed our application in the month of January, I think, in the Supreme Court. In February, it was admitted. And it came up for hearing in the month of August 2017. During this time, I was personally leading the litigation, and I was quite certain that this litigation will become a benchmark litigation in the country. So in the month of August, the hearings happened. In the month of October, the results came. And lo and behold, it was in our favor.
Wow.
And it actually became a benchmark litigation. It is now a case law taught in law schools across the country. Right. And one of the things that my lawyers could not do was to cite precedents, because there were no precedents. So the judge actually drew precedents from around the world. And then he gave a judgment which has now become a case law. Of course, it is taught in law schools and also used and cited by many lawyers arguing similar matters. From there, I think once you demonstrate this kind of a success, obviously you gain respect, trust, you lead from the front. And then we launched a series of operational improvement initiatives around reliability, efficiency, and above all, safety. In the end, we ended up winning so many awards, Prashant, that I had to actually order for a new showcase to keep all our awards. And these awards not only came from within the country, but also internationally. And if I start talking about just the operational excellence part, that will be a fat chapter in my book. Suffice it to say that during my tenure in Nava Power for 5 years, we must have implemented at least 50 improvement projects, major ones. I'm not talking of smaller initiatives. And in the end, we not only became one of the most reliable generators of electricity in the country, but also one of the most efficient and one of the most data-driven, digitally enabled organization. We also established a simulator lab to train our own engineers. And then I asked the engineers to write content for training. And then we use that content not only to train our own engineers, but also train external staff. And a proud moment came when many state electricity boards started sending people to our plant to get them trained in how to run and operate and maintain these facilities. So a lot of interesting examples on the operational side. Right. And again, the important part was building up people, and they were all engineers who had been working with a particular mindset. I did not have bright MBAs from IIMs to work with me on this transformation. So how do you really take such people and shape them up into such potent forces that can help you win major battles in life? So I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from that experience.
That's really wonderful, really wonderful. What role did engagement of employees play in this whole cultural and business transformation? Because from a culture of given up to a culture of high performance, and then transformation and 50 new projects, and this becoming a case study, uh, as a transformation case study. So what role did engagement of employees play, and how did you ensure the engagement of employees?
I must say it played an extremely important role, and at all levels. And well, I used multiple ways to reach out and connect and engage with employees. I spoke to you about the initial open house that I had. So I made it a practice that every quarter I will have an open house, and we used to call it Sambad, where I would go and talk to the employees about what was happening and ask them to pose any questions that they may have. I think it's extremely important for leaders to share information transparently with people, particularly people who are at the lower end of the hierarchy who do not have access to that information firsthand. And if the top management fails to provide the information in a clear, transparent, and a trustworthy manner, it leads to all kinds of grapevines developing in the organization. So I preempted all that by having a very open and transparent dialogue with people. Then I started a practice of lunch with the chief executive. So people who were at N-2 and N-3 level, I got the opportunity to meet them over lunch, and where I got to know them as individuals, as professionals, as fathers, husbands. I also understood their concerns, their aspirations. So to me, that was extremely useful in establishing a connect at lower levels of the organization. And then what I did was I called the head of HR and I said, pick up the top talent of the company. And I instituted a chief executives club. And I used to nurture and mentor these young leaders personally throughout the year. And in many ways, these young leaders then became my ambassadors who were carrying on the messages and the lessons to the rest of the organization. And there was a healthy competition amongst young people to get into the CE's club. Right? So the recognition that people got, the visibility was so powerful and potent that everybody wanted to be, it became an aspirational thing. And of course, I tried to organize many social events, cultural events. I encouraged people at least to devote half a day on knowledge building, experience sharing. I think in many ways, a lot of these initiatives, employee engagement initiatives or cultural initiatives, helped me transform the organization, Prashant.
That's really so nice. That's fantastic. What will be your advice to young leaders?
My advice to young leaders would be to be authentic, right? The first advice is to be authentic. Don't try to copy anybody. Be genuine, be true to yourself, and be true to others. Second advice will be to be agile and to adapt. And I think I have had to adapt myself in different conditions and situations. And a lot of professionals, because of their attitude, rigidity in mindset, they do not achieve their full potential, or they don't grab the opportunities that come their way. Also, they need to be curious, right? And I found that senior middle managers, they just stop being curious. They have no interest left. They think that they have achieved it all in life. And the classic thing that, what got you here will keep you there all the time doesn't happen.
Right.
And Prashant, you need to keep working harder as you grow higher, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a lesson that many people forget. So I would say authenticity, agility, curiosity, and last but not the least, humility.
Mhm.
To me, that's extremely important. You should never let success go to your head. And while dealing with people, particularly internally, externally, one has to be extremely humble and polite. And even when you're recounting your achievements, I think it has to be done more to inspire rather than just to get people to appreciate you. I think it's a tough one, but certainly I would say young people, if they follow this. And I must say, by the way, I'm very inspired by young people, Prashant. And I think the youth of India are the true strength of our country. I work a lot with young people. I really admire their capabilities. They are very savvy, very hardworking, very digital in their approach, very productive. But I hope they all go all the way, right? And I think as senior people now, who will be handing over the baton to the younger generation at some point in time, we owe it to them that we show them the path, and I hope they just don't get distracted.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This Generation Z is very high on aspiration, very hardworking. We have to just align their goals with the organization's goals, and they just go all out. And they're going to take the world to the next level, like no other generation. They're out to perform, they're eager to deliver, and I think they've seen the a tough life that their parents led, who were Gen X, through some five recessions and downturns. And therefore, they're quite tough and they're quite resilient and quite determined to make things happen.
All the young people, Prashant, in our group, Zuari group, where I currently work, exceedingly talented people, and they're making such a huge difference. We get them fresh from college, and we nurture them to the best of our ability. But you will be happy to know that they make a disproportionate contribution to the growth and development of this group. And we are a pretty old group and seen as an old conglomerate. But the truth
Absolutely.
is that these youngsters are bustling with energy and do so much more than what their previous generation did. So I'm very enthused about these young people, and I only hope and pray for the best for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so do I. And I'm uh, as much sure as you are that they're going to take the world to the next level. They're very environmentally conscious. They're not going to, and they're driven by purpose, they're driven by passion, not just money. Money is very important to them, but purpose and passion is even more important. So, yeah, I'm sure the world will be a better place to live as these guys lead companies, societies, and countries and create something which is superior to what we've been able to create. Last question. We, as We Matter, aspire to be amongst the top five global companies in our area of employee engagement and well-being in next 5 to 7 years. What would be your advice for us to be, because so far all these areas are the coveted area for the American companies. We want to be the first Asian and first Indian company to be there. So what will be your advice based on your experiences, which would help us get there?
I think you are going to fill a gap, Prashant, which has been there for ages. This is a completely neglected area. And I always talk about creating an organizational glue in the organization. You know, you talk to HR managers, CHROs, and they're always crying about attrition. And most of them are at their wits' end trying to deal with it. But my own experience, and I would be completing 34 years of work soon, is that organizations must create that glue that binds people. Shared values, shared culture, and what you talk about and what you intend to do through your engagement initiatives and well-being initiatives. You need to create that glue. You're an experienced professional and I know what you mean. I don't want to give you a long lecture. But this is that magic recipe that keeps people. I used to work, and I gave you my example in IDFC. A guy came to me and he took out a piece of paper and he said, write down what price will you charge. I want you to work with me. And I know you are very poorly paid. And I said, you keep the paper in your pocket. I'm not interested. Even though my salary was way below benchmarks. Because I clearly understood, and I give the credit to my bosses as well, who clearly communicated how valuable that position was. So when organizations start treating individuals as numbers, boxes, you know, a bunch of KPIs. KPIs are important. But you know, at the end of it, there's a human being. As it is after this AI wave, Prashant, I don't know how many human beings would be left. But whatever is left, I think you still need to worry about dealing with people, right? And you can't deal with them mechanically. You can't deal with them through artificial intelligence. And I think going forward, I mean, the companies right now, interestingly, the companies who are at the cutting edge of technology, they understand the importance of people much more than anybody else. And they will do everything to retain the talent that they think is critical for the company. So suffice it to say that you are going to address a long felt need in the Indian corporate sector. And your work with the CHROs and others should be exceedingly useful to them in ensuring employee satisfaction, in addressing attrition, and more importantly, making employees feel worthwhile. Right? Friday evening, somebody should not think that he's escaping from a prison, Prashant.
Correct.
Right? They should feel that, you know, they're going to miss something. And somebody asked me this question many years ago, and they said, you know, you come to office, you're very excited. What brings you in? I said, go and ask Mr. Tendulkar, you know, when he's going to the pitch, does he go with, you know,
in a hurry to go back?
Exactly, in a hurry to go back to the pavilion. Isn't he excited? Right? And these days, Virat Kohli and other players likewise, right? So for a professional, the workplace is like that pitch. You go there and you do your best. And obviously you should be full of positivity and you should be looking forward to it. Every Monday morning, you should be looking forward to coming in.
Correct.
And as CEOs, as HR heads, we forget about all that. And we do not, you know, create that environment, that glue. And what you're going to do or trying to do, Prashant, is that creating that glue to keep people excited about their jobs. So I wish you all the best in your initiative. I think much needed, and certainly deserves your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And it was fantastic talking to you. I'm sure the youngsters would learn a lot, but more than youngsters, I have learned a lot personally. And I think I'm charged to get to the next level with all the learnings that I've received from you. Now you've transformed a sector, you've transformed a country, you've transformed infrastructure, which is the biggest backbone for the GDP growth of any country. And we're seeing the results, right? From 800 million, we are now 3 trillion and wanting to go to 5 trillion, etc., which wouldn't have been possible without the infrastructure push that you and your team started in this country. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for all the learning, and thanks a lot for your time. And with this, we end our meeting and interview with Athar, and thank him for his valuable input, insights, and time.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Thank you, Prashant, for having me. Thank you.